What's up and hello everyone. Wow, so we are back here on this beautiful Saturday afternoon going to be talking about Survivor season 34 episode 6. And there are no words to describe this episode. I feel like we're going to start with the end and tribal council and talk all about that. So my name is Rachel.
And I'm Alyssa. And just a warning, guys, this is going to be about some heavier stuff, just like this episode was. So it's going to be, a lot.
Yeah, and obviously Alyssa and I are not experts on everything that we're going to be talking about today, so there's no need to leave hate comments or anything like that, because I know I was commenting on some Survivor YouTube channels, Survivor on CBS videos, and then people left some rude ass comments. So there's no need to fight in the comments section or anything like that.
Yeah. So I guess we should start by saying the obvious. Zeke is a transgender male, and he was outed on national television. And nothing about that will be okay. Outing someone is never okay, and outing someone on national television is even worse. So we're going to be talking about Varner later in this episode, obviously, but I think we need to make it clear that we are condemning his actions and not the person. So no matter who did it, it's a bad thing to do, and I sincerely hope that all of you watching have never even considered outing another person, because that's not okay.
Yeah, I think definitely what Alyssa just said is very true and applies. And just in general, I feel like in general life, not even in the game aspect where we both don't think that this was applicable to the game in any sense, nor was it even something that you should really bring up in the game, to use as strategy or whatever you want to call it in order to make yourself go further in the game. But yeah, definitely I feel like we need to talk about Zeke. This is all about Zeke, and it's about Zeke, and it's not about I don't really know how to word it, but it's not talking about
Varner.
Varner.
Not be about Varner.
Yeah, but we're going to talk about Zeke. Yeah. So in 2 seasons of Survivor, he has not told anyone that he is transgender, and we see this happen at Tribal Council, where he's in 2 seasons I haven't told anyone, and then it sort of cuts back to everything else that's happening at Tribal Council.
Yeah, and I think part of the faux pas that Varner made was assuming that A, Zeke came out in his first season, and B, that Zeke needed to come out. So yeah, coming out is never something that they have to do. So I feel like that's another reason why that was wrong.
Yeah, I feel like Zeke really took this shitty situation and is making it into something truly beautiful. Zeke mentioned, he does not want to be the first trans Survivor player, known as the first trans Survivor player, but he wants to be known just as Zeke. And, I feel like we truly feel like this is a good reason behind, not telling America, not telling anyone, on last season, this season, that he is transgender, because I really don't feel that, certain aspects of your life don't affect the game, and this is one of them. It was shitty to be outed on national television, yes, and I feel like whenever Zeke was ready, or if he was never ready, he should not have had to talk about it, because if it's his own personal decision whether to tell people or whether not to tell people, and so far it was his choice not to tell people because he didn't want to be known as just the trans Survivor player.
Yeah, and I feel like stuff you can talk about, we've talked about gender bias in Survivor before, and another thing that Survivor kind of has a problem with is tokenism, where there's a lot of the token gay character. So I feel like you can see that a lot on Ty's season when he was the token gay. So
Yeah,
I understand why Zeke would not want to be like the token trans character.
Yeah, and I definitely feel that on like a lot of reality TV and even like other like popular TV outlets, you see not a lot of diversity, whether it's racially or like sexually. So I feel like what Alyssa is saying with like the token character, we see it a lot on The Amazing Race. You see only like one type of each kind of diverse character casted, so they're like the token insert adjective here, when it really shouldn't be. I feel like, you cast people that are good for the show. You cast people, for Survivor that would play the game, and it doesn't really matter. Like you shouldn't be like what's like affirmative actioning, like trying to get certain kinds of people just because you need to fill some sort of quota on your TV show. So I definitely feel like good for CBS, like not like exploiting Zeke, like letting Zeke choose not to be known as like just the trans Survivor player, but like allowing Zeke, so like when he's ready, or like if he was never ready, so they would never have to talk about it. So I think really last season, when there was speculation about it, that it was good that like like Zeke, he didn't want to talk about it season 33, and that was okay.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think that there's not really much to say other than outing someone was wrong. And it's better to use this as a learning experience, I feel like, because Survivor, I feel like, is watched by people who might not necessarily be as like knowledgeable about the LGBTQ community as others might be. So I feel like it's a great learning experience for people to learn how to handle outing someone and coming out in a way that's positive and constructive for all involved, because obviously Zeke handled it very well and the other people on his tribe handled it very well. And I feel like even after making that mistake, Varner handled it very well by apologizing for it, because apologizing is something you need to do, I feel like, after you out someone. Yeah,
I think overall, like throughout everything, Zeke has been super poised, and in tribal council, he was very poised, very calm, and I was like, wow. Like he handled it so well after like a huge bombshell on his life is just brought into tribal council, and like his speech at the end was very moving and very beautiful. I like put in a similar sort of situation, I don't know if we would be able to have like the words to describe how we were feeling, have like the correct words to say in that sort of situation. So I feel like Zeke's speech at the end, it really shows like how much growth he has had throughout this entire season, with the whole metamorphosis thing, like in the immunity challenge. Like I can't even spell metamorphosis on Google and like Word without spell check. Like how the hell did Haley know how to, like, that was crazy. But like I don't know, I feel like Zeke really, like, he knows who he is, and I think that's something super admirable. Like he knows what he wants, he knows what he, like, how he's gonna get it, and like it's something I feel like a lot of people can look up to. And I know Zeke was mentioning about like role model, like for anyone going through anything, like any kind of situation. So I really feel like people and like Zeke can use this crappy situation and make it into something like a really make it into something so much larger. Like we can start a bigger conversation around this topic, and I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it can start something like super great.
yeah. So obviously we are not experts on trans people and trans rights, but if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, and Rachel and I will do our best to try to answer your questions surrounding this topic. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I guess now that we've discussed the situation and stuff, we're going to touch a little bit on Varner's reasoning. And once again, I want to reiterate, nothing can make this an okay reason to like out someone. So we're more talking about this reasoning because we want to show that Varner is just a human who is just flawed. We don't want everyone to be attacking him personally And it's one of those things where you gotta hate the sin and love the sinner, because obviously Varner, as a gay man himself, is a part of the LGBTQ community, and it would be upsetting for me, at least, if he was like kicked out or otherwise, driven out because he made a mistake. So
Yeah, and I feel like definitely we are talking about the action, not like trying to throw blame or like be rude towards the person in general. And I feel like that's what a lot of people on social media need to do. Like if you want to send a tweet or something, like send it as like a tweet of support to Zeke rather than a tweet of meanness to Jeff Varner. I feel like Jeff Varner definitely knows like what he did was wrong after the fact, and I definitely feel like he's still like beating himself up every day over it. So I feel like there's no real reason to keep on pushing like flames to the fire in that regard. But I mean, I feel like the first thing is the decision to do this at tribal council. I feel like if Varner really wanted to bring it up, like a more appropriate time, whereas it would still not be an appropriate time, would be when everyone is at camp together. But tribal council, it's like, I mean, I guess we can understand like it's his last ditch effort, but tribal council makes it so that like you're trapping everyone in that situation. Like you can't leave, like you're forced to talk about it.
Yeah, and I feel like in general, it's just bad for people to feel trapped. Survivor, and I think feeling trapped about something that's so important, like being outed, is like especially bad. And I do believe that Varner said what he said, and like thinking that it would be a way to save himself in the game. And I disagree with Sarah's comment about it being a malicious attack on Zeke, because I honestly don't think that Varner intended to be malicious. That being said, still not right, etc., etc. And I've heard other reasoning that goes something along the lines of Varner assumed that Zeke was already out in his previous season.
Yeah.
So he did not think that he was outing Zeke to the entire world. He thought that he was outing Zeke to the 6 people on their tribe, which again, 6 people is still people, and it still should have been Zeke's choice to be out or not to them.
Yeah.
So,
and I definitely feel like this shows the sort of like lack of like judgment or even like ignorance maybe, but like just assuming that because like obviously since Zeke played last season, no one saw his previous season, no one knows what happened, but like Varner, like I saw also was sort of reasoning behind it was that like he assumed Zeke was out, and that was like one of the reasons he was brought back this season, because he was like the token trans survivor player last season, which is like what we were talking about. Like I feel like with the reasoning behind this, there's just so many steps that led to this like fatal decision, because like I don't know, I honestly don't really see the logic behind it, but then on the other hand, I do see where Jeff Varner is coming from as someone who has played 2 times, never made the jury. He's desperate to make the merge next episode, and like you could probably tell the merge was coming at like 13 or so, so Jeff really just needed to make it through this vote, and we see in previews that next time is the merge. And so like I can see like that aspect of it, but like it's still like we're saying, it doesn't make it okay to bring this sort of personal information into the game. It's like not worth it for the $1 million.
I think that also one thing that might show a little bit of ignorance is that Varner assumed that trans people come out, and like Zeke said this, or whether I've just been reading it online or whatever, but like trans people aren't necessarily like the rest of the LGBTQ community, where like they feel like they have to come out, partially because when you're trans, it's one of those things where people look at you differently after they figure it out. And like obviously people can look at you differently when they figure out that you're like gay, lesbian, bi, or whatever. But being trans, I feel like it invites a lot of questions that like you don't really want to answer, especially when it comes to like naming stuff. People are always like, oh, what's your real name? And it's like, his real name is Zeke, because that's who he is. And so I feel like that's one problem where even within a community like the LGBTQ community, experiences can differ a lot from person to person.
No, yeah, I definitely feel that. Like in high school, I volunteered at like the domestic violence center, and like you definitely see like an skewed correlation with violence within like for towards women and then the LGBTQ plus community. And like you're saying, I feel like transgender now in like today's society is like less accepted than like gay rights and stuff like that. Obviously, we still have a long ways to go with everyone being equal and things like that. But I definitely feel like what you're saying, Alyssa, is very true. Like there's still such a huge stigma around the trans community with like the whole name thing and even pronouns. Like people not referring to someone else by their preferred pronouns, it's such a like lack of disrespect. And even if it is like the person's personal choice to call other people like what they want or whatever, but like honestly, like that's just so, I feel like it's so wrong and so rude to not like call someone by their preferred name, by their preferred pronouns, because that is who they identify as.
And that's who they are, which is another big thing. Like, you shouldn't just be calling trans people by their name and by their pronouns because it's what they prefer. It's because it's who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that being said, I think that the reactions that Zeke's tribe mates had to the situation were all very good. I've already kind of said that I'm not as totally in agreement with Sarah's reaction as everyone else's, but like, being supportive of someone if they come out or are outed is really important, just because it can be a really lonely experience, and feeling like you're alone in something like that is obviously like not a good thing. And that being said, like Rachel and I were talking about earlier, support for someone without bashing the other person. And so I think it's really important that they like tried to show support for Zeke and condemn Varner's actions. And part of the reason why I disliked Sarah's reaction so much was because she seemed to be condemning Varner himself instead of just the actions that he took. And like I've already said, I think that he was not intending to be malicious, and Sarah kind of got on a high horse about the whole "that's not me" thing, which I'm not comfortable with, just because if you are a supporter of LGBTQ rights, etc., that doesn't make you like automatically a better person. It just means that you might have different experiences or be more open-minded than someone who might not support LGBTQ rights. And that should be the start of a conversation, not condemning someone, because by condemning them, you're just going to make them less comfortable with the subject and less willing to learn.
Yeah.
Like we've been saying, this should be a learning experience for everyone involved.
Yeah, like a learning experience, opening up the conversation. And I feel like definitely just outing someone in general, not having to be on national TV, but like in your personal life, like it definitely takes so many rights away from the person that is in the closet for this, because they should be able to choose when they feel comfortable to talk about talk about their life, because it's definitely not in your right to be spreading all of these things about other people. So I definitely feel like Varner doing this definitely took something away from Zeke.
Yeah. And that being said, you should never assume that anyone is out, because there are various reasons why people might choose to stay in the closet or just never come out at all. And so assuming that someone is out because they've already played the game before, or because they're out to you, or because you think that you live in a very LGBTQ positive area isn't like a correct assumption to make. And the only way you can know if someone is out or not is to ask them. And if that's not a comfortable asking them, then why are you thinking about outing them at all? So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there has been a lot of like lapses in judgment, I feel like, throughout this episode in Tribal Council. And I think the sad part is like, I feel like Jeff Varner could have switched the vote to Ozzy if Jeff Varner really wanted to stay in the game that badly. Like, I feel like the vote could have been switched to Ozzy. I feel like Varner going to sort of attack Zeke and attack his personal life was sort of like the tombstone in his coffin.
The nail in his coffin, you mean?
Yes, that was the metaphor I was going for.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like people have very mixed opinions on like where and when in Survivor personal attacks are okay. Like, there are plenty of people who are like, oh, what Johnny Fairplay did pretending his grandma was dead, that's perfectly fine. And then there are other things that like cross a line. And I feel like it's one of those things where people believe that since so much money is on the line, anything goes. And I feel like that's a poor assumption to make, especially when it ends up with someone getting hurt, especially someone like Zeke, who obviously loves the game of Survivor. And now his memories of it are kind of going to be a little bit tainted because Survivor is also the reason that he got outed to millions of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely feel like we'll have to see, like, in the upcoming weeks and stuff like that. Like, I think we've seen a lot of, like, positivity within the Survivor community, at least, like, from what I've seen online. But I'm sure, like, some of the comments on some of the stuff that we've seen, Alyssa, a lot of people are trying to make this into, like, a political bashing. So when I commented on one of the Survivor on CBS videos saying, like, you know, like, outing someone is never okay. Like, Zeke should have had the rights to discuss this whenever he wanted to. People commented some really rude things about, like, this is all like a political thing, like, you know. So I don't know. I think we'll have to see in like the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, I feel like there were some parts of this that made it seem like CBS might have been trying a little too hard to make it seem like, oh, we're very LGBTQ positive. Look at us. We're so great. But I feel like also part of it is there is really no other stance to take, I feel like. So that's interesting, I feel.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Yeah, like I think we were saying before, I think Tribal Council was really, like, awkward and uncomfortable at first, as it should have been when someone does something like this. But then I really feel like by the end, it really turned into something that Zeke, and like, it could be real, something truly beautiful. I think we mentioned this before, and like, I really think it'll be something that's gonna turn out for the better in the end. I really truly believe, like, something good can come out of this crap situation.
Yeah. And then also, since we are supposedly recapping this entire episode of Survivor, we're going to touch a little on the rest of this episode. But what we really wanted you guys to hear was what we just said. So we're like running out of time. You can stop now. That's fine. The rest of this recap isn't going to be that interesting, but you should still stick around.
I mean, rewatching the episode, I feel like a lot of the stuff, I don't know, it wasn't like monumentous, like something that we should need to talk about. But like at the beginning of the episode, Debbie lies about what happened on Exile Island, and I feel like this was really good because obviously Alyssa and I talked about this last episode. Like, why in hell would Debbie say she got free food, she got Cochrane, she got an advantage given to her? Like, no way. And then Debbie goes one step further, and then she's like, we didn't even have Flint on Exile Island, which is like, okay, you know, she's trying to get everyone to pity her and stuff like that. So I'm like, good for Debbie. Like, that's fine. But I feel like Debbie going into the merge is now super powerful because she has an advantage and she had food last episode.
Yeah. I feel like the one thing that, like, Debbie will be bringing Debbie down is Debbie. So, I mean, kudos to her if she can continue to, like, through the game, but it seems like there's been a lot of setup for, like, something where it's her versus Brad Culpepper, because they've been constantly butting heads for the last few episodes or so.
Yeah. So I think another big thing this episode was Orange Tribe, after the reward challenge, losing all the pizzas. They definitely talk about how hard the game is. We see like Sari, Aubrey, and Sierra all get some talking time, and they're all like crying. But I really think the big part during this time was when Brad was talking about Monica. And I feel like Monica is getting a lot of screen time, like even more than some of the players this season, honestly. But I really think this scene shows like Brad's like who Brad is as a person. And I feel like with the whole like decorating thing from a few episodes to this, to like how he handled the Debbie situation and was how he was painted in the positive light during that, I don't know, I really feel like Brad is being built up either like a great winner's at it, or he's gonna go out like right before the finale and it'll be really sad.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting because like a lot of people didn't really like Brad Culpepper in his first season. I'm one of those people. So I think it's kind of been interesting to see like a different side of him. And I feel like not playing on a blood versus water season has actually been very good for Brad, because it like gives him one less weakness, I feel like, but he also has that touchstone of Monica like in his head or whatever. And I feel like that could also be a really interesting story to tell. It like Final Tribal Council would be I went from I've almost won this game, and now I have this opportunity to almost win this game, and yeah, like make that kind of story arc for himself.
Yeah, I definitely feel
But
like
it was. You can go.
I definitely feel like that juxtaposition from last season to this season is like super interesting, because like I feel like Brad didn't really have that good of a edit last time, and even when he was brought back for the second chance vote-ons, he was sat between Spencer and Joe, and then those were the last two spots like to get on to the last season. So it's like that was sort of like sucky, because you know there's only two left and you're sitting between Spencer and Joe, like you're not getting on this season. But I really think we see this episode. Also, Aubrey is amazed at how Brad's opening up. She says that Brad is the most genuine person out there on the island, and she wants to work with him. Sari wants to work with Brad also. I think Brad is in like a pretty good position, but he is like the biggest guy out there. He's probably going to have a huge ass target on his back because like all the other big guys have been voted out.
Yeah, I don't know. There's still Ozzy, and like people keep on thinking of Ozzy as a physical threat still, which is interesting to me just because like Ozzy's obviously like changed a lot physically since his last time on Survivor. So I think that's interesting that like people are noticing Ozzy as a physical threat, but not Brad Culpepper. So
yeah, I think it'll be interesting because I feel like Brad is able to make like genuine relationships and like with his alliance. So I feel like even if Brad is on the chopping block, you know, Brad has Sierra, he probably could get Sari and Aubrey, he could get Ty. And like if that like group is able to stick together and trust each other and stuff like that, I feel like Ty would be willing to play his idol for Brad and stuff like that. So I feel like Brad could be sitting good right now. We'll see.
yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, especially because like coming up to the merge now, I feel like Brad's group of 5 is kind of in a solid position because they only need 2 other people from the other tribe to make it into a majority. So we'll have to see how that plays out next week.
Yeah, so next week is the merge on Survivor. Wow, like 13 people merge. I think it's going to be crazy. I feel like, I don't know, at least maybe like we'll probably see like the whole Zeke, Andrea, Sarah, Ozzy, maybe like plus or minus some people in their alliance stick together, then I think we can see like the Brad Culpepper Sierra thing stick together. So I think these are going to be like the two opposing groups during the merge, and then everyone else will like trickle and fall into one of these two groups.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of like what we see in a traditional merge, but I wonder if there's going to be some variation on like trust clusters or voting blocks or something that makes it less clear cut than just here are the two alliances that are going to go down. But like I've talked about before, and switching tribes so often makes it more difficult to have like a pagonging situation just because everyone's kind of already been with everyone else.
Yeah, I definitely feel like at the moment, a lot of people have been playing somewhat safe, like voting out the people in the minority. We see Caleb go because he wasn't in the original group at the tribe swap. We see Sandra and then Jeff Varner go. They weren't in the majority at the swaps. So I'm hoping like the gameplay is not going to be so black and white as we're saying, like not just the pagonging of these two sides of the tribe. And I think going into the merge, I feel like Ozzy could be the merge boot.
Yeah, I feel like Ozzy could be too, unless he wins the individual immunity. I feel like people are going to be trying to get Ozzy out now that it's individual game.
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening. That's what I'm going to put for fantasy, but I'm not sure because if he does win immunity, then, that's the problem. So, yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, we'll see you guys next week for our recap. Sorry that this one was kind of really serious, but it kind of needed to be serious to cover what was being said. Once again, if you have any questions for us about the LGBTQ community or what you can do to help out, please feel free to put them down in the comments, and we can try to see what we can do to help educate you and educate the world about the LGBTQ community and what you can do to help it. Yeah, we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.